My name is Carlos Negrón, Director of Church Engagement for Missio Nexus. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. Today is February 7th, 2024 for our Church Mission Leaders peer-to-peer virtual event. My co-host today is Matthew Ellison, who is the president of 1615 and a church missions coach. Hello, Matthew. How you doing
Carlos,
today?
it's always good to see you, brother.
The same. Well, as the local church prepares to send, or as you could say, is sending members to fulfill the Great Commission globally, how does it stay involved in caring for its missionaries' spiritual, mental, and physical health? How can the local church truly be involved, or I guess be an involved part of the overseas workers' lives, their families, their struggles, their successes? The local church needs to be prepared to care for them as best as it can, sometimes in partnership with mission agencies. Pastor Jeff has dedicated many years of his life to this topic and has developed several best practices in the area of member missionary care. During our time together today, we're going to consider these best practices and how we can strategically implement them in our local church to care for those that God has entrusted to us. So today we have Pastor Jeff Jackson with us. Pastor
Well,
Jeff, yes, sir. It's great to have you with us.
it's
Pastor Jeff, he has served in the U.S. Army, just church planted in central Philippines, I believe, in the San Diego area, pastored a church in Phoenix that was deeply engaged in ministry to refugees that have been settled there. He's also the founder of Shepherd's Staff Mission Facilitators. I believe he currently serves as the pastor of Radiance International Church in San Diego and also as the director of community engagement at Calvary San Diego in Chula Vista, California. And he's been married to Helen for 46 years. That alone deserves a God bless you, brother. And they have been graced with 3 grown married children and 7 grandchildren. Wow.
Yeah.
Jeff, welcome to Peer to Peer.
all right. Well, thank you for the welcome, brother, and the introduction. It's good to connect with all of you wherever you are in the country. It is morning here. It's 10 a.m. in the morning here in the San Diego area. And you're probably aware of this. It's soggy in Southern California, something that we don't get much here. We actually average about 10 inches of rain a year. And with these storms, these atmospheric rivers that have come into the area, we're going to get 6 or 7 inches of rain in less than a week. And it's kind of wreaked havoc in a lot of parts of San Diego, not all of San Diego, but certain parts where actually there was a lot of homeless population and so forth. And a lot of the drainage ditches and so forth are full of garbage and trash and stuff like that. And so the rivers are overflowing and so forth. So I appreciate you keeping in prayer California in general and San Diego in particular. So I'm blessed to be able to come and share it with you today and talk about some of the things that I've learned about, what I call direct send missionary care. And let me kind of just give you a bit of my personal backstory that sort of laid the foundation for the stuff that I've learned to put together sort of as best practices from trial and error. So when I went to the Philippines, my wife and I and our 3 children were sent directly from our home church in the north part of San Diego County. And what that meant was that our church handled all of our receiving and receiving of donations. We were sent over there and we were cared for by our home church. And the level of care that we received from the pastor of our church, from the elders, from the members of our church was absolutely crucial to our success that we had on the field. And one of the things that happened while I was over there, I worked side by side in a lot of ministry in Cebu City with people from more traditional agency approaches. And it was always interesting to hear their story of how they were cared for, primarily by their agencies rather than their home churches. And so we had a lot of interesting discussions about that. And for a number of reasons, some foundations of thought were laid, which eventually gave birth to the ministry that he just mentioned, shepherd staff, mission facilitators. And so over the years, what I've done is, as a result of my personal experience and then coming alongside churches that understood the value of an agency more as an enabler, an empowerer of what they were doing, rather than taking on the whole responsibility, in a sense, for the missionary, other than prayer and financial giving. As I interacted with agencies and then churches, I developed some ideas and some structures in which to kind of prepare churches to send and send well. And so let me kind of give you first of all the sort of theological groundwork for the idea, and I'm just going to lay this out for you very quickly. You guys are all sort of in the missions world, so in some senses, what I'm going to say is not new to you, but it's always good to reemphasize it. My conviction is that the local church is the primary vehicle through which God wants to, complete the Great Commission. And the local church has an absolutely crucial role, as do as do agencies, but in particular, the local church, where a person has grown in the Lord, where their faithfulness has been observed, where their gifts have been discovered and then fine-tuned, where deep and meaningful relationships are made. And then when God moves on those people's hearts, and that calling, sort of in the Acts 13 model, where the Holy Spirit said to the leaders at the church of Antioch, set apart Saul and Barnabas for the work that I've called them to. The calling was to 2 of the 5, and the 2 that were called to go heard not just their personal calling, but their calling was given to the other leaders of their church. And of course, they were sent by the church, but actually they were sent by the Holy Spirit. So again, nothing new there for this audience, probably. But one of the things that is crucial to understand, I think, is that the local church does have a role to play, and those deep, meaningful relationships that those that are called to go have with the members of the church are really the bedrock or the foundation from which the missionary can stay healthy in those areas that Carlos mentioned, in spiritual, in emotional, and physical health. And there are some, as I've learned over the years, when I was first going to missionary care training through Barnabas International, as I spent time with a guy that many of you have heard of, Neil Parolo, and using some of his resources, particularly serving as senders, it became very clear that the church can have this role, and yet there are special trials and special challenges that missionaries face that really take a professional. And so it's a combination of what the church brings relationally and the relational connection that's already there, plus what the agency brings in that area almost of specialized care. And as I started to go and attend different trainings, and I talked to some of the member care people, I won't mention them, but many of you would know their names if I did. They said, look, we're trained, we're specialists in certain areas, but 90% of what it takes to keep a missionary healthy on the field can come from the home church. If the home church has a passion to do that, and if they're willing to take steps to learn what the missionary experience is like. And so over the years, kind of queuing off of 3 John, where, John tells Gaius, speaking of the missionaries of his day, where John says to him, hey, when these guys come, when they're in your town, you love on them, and then you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God. And so that's sort of the theological concept, that the local church has the capacity to send their own that God calls to the field on their journey to represent him around the globe. So the upshot of it is that, hey, the local church can send and they can care for those that they send. And sort of what I did not long after I got back is as I was going through the book of Philippians, I saw that there was a model there to be followed. And one of the key concepts there is the idea that Paul tells the church that at Philippi that, from the first day he got there until the day he's writing to them from prison, they have had partnership in the gospel. And they helped him, from the day he got there, where he was able to stay with Lydia and so forth in all these practical ways. So there you have some examples laid out there in the book of Philippians on how to do direct send missionary care. All right, now let me get practical, make this as practical as I can with the amount of time that I have left. So one of the things that we've developed at Shepherd Staff and that we've seen fine-tuned in churches is the idea that on the pathway to the mission field, there are two teams, two structures that are helpful to be created. The first structure is what we at Shepherd Staff call the practical care team. And the basic idea of the practical care team is the missionary himself, using the book, serving as senders as sort of a foundation. He shares the vision with the people that he's already got relationship with, and he builds a team of people that are going to help him in the nuts and bolts practical care area of what's needed as they go previous to going to the field, while they're on the field, and when they get back. And there's 6 key areas covered in that book. And again, most of you are probably familiar with it, but the concept is that the missionary builds this practical care team. And the 6 key areas are covered by members of that practical care team. And ideally, the practical care team is composed of people in his home church that he has real and meaningful relationships with, that are going to continue to express their love to the missionary and his family in the area that they've chosen to serve in. And so what that does, one of the things that does, and I've learned this over the years from the people that have kind of, again, put this into practice, is it lets the leadership of the church know from the beginning, when this missionary begins to build his practical care team, what kind of connection level does he have with members of the church? It's almost a part of the screening process. Does this person who's been part of our church, does he have deep enough, meaningful enough relationships with people that when they hear his vision and they've seen the heart that God's given him and the calling that God's given him, are they willing to buy in? Are they willing to say, hey, we love you so much, we want to be part of what you're doing with what we can do from our side? And it gives the leadership of the church the opportunity then to observe and see, does this person have the capacity to get people to buy in to their vision? And so that's helpful. To me, that's clearly confirmation of a calling where it's not, again, just the person that's called, but the actual sending and care for the person is going to come from their home church. That's another kind of unique thing that I sort of wrote into Shepherd Staff, is the idea of referring to the home church as the home church rather than the sending church. And the reason why we use that terminology, it's not required, obviously, but the idea is it's your home church. It's your family. It's where everything you are, there's been family members participating in your growth up to this moment, and you have this interdependency, these interpersonal relationships that are really meaningful. So that's the first thing, is that a local church can say to the ones who they know are called, the leadership of the church can say, hey, can you build a practical care team? And here's how you do that. And again, there are resources available on how to do this, from Shepherd Staff, and probably a lot of other churches are doing it too. Now, the second one, and this gets more into the realm of what we would traditionally consider member care, is what we call at Shepherd Staff the missionary nurture team. And that basically is coming at this from the angle that the missionary and their family, they need pastoral level care, shepherd level care. And so this is a team of people that is selected by the pastor or by the missions director or missions pastor or by the missions committee of the local church. And the basic idea is, hey, we want to select a handful of people, 5, 6, up to 10 people, maybe more, that have demonstrated certain spiritual maturity and certain spiritual qualities. They're already operating in this realm in their relationships with other church members. They're generally not going to be new believers. They're not going to be people generally that don't have good relationship skills. And so the idea is that the church leadership or the missions committee selects a group of people that are able to provide, spiritual and emotional encouragement care to the missionaries. And so, again, the idea being that these are people that have a good handle on the word. They've demonstrated the ability to speak the word into somebody's life at the appropriate moment. They're people that have proven that they're good listeners. They're people that have the gift of encouragement, so that anybody that has a conversation with them, whenever somebody has a conversation with them, that person goes away encouraged. And so that's the kind of people that you're looking for. You're not looking for people that, need to have somebody listen to them or need to feel good about themselves, have somebody open up their personal lives to them and so forth. So there's certain criteria that you're looking for in the missionary nurture team members. And then what we do and what we've done, and again, there's 1,000 resources out there available for this stuff, but then we developed a missionary nurture team training. And so the basic idea was, once that team is selected and the right people are there, then there's a training session that's set up. And because people can have those gifts, they can have that ability to be a good listener, mature in the word, always a good encourager, somebody that any member of the church loves to have contact with. They can have those qualities, those gifts, those talents, that kind of experience, and they've never been overseas. They just naturally have that. So what we want to add to those people's sort of inventory is this idea of like, okay, how do we take what you have by experience and by gifting, and how do we shape it and mold it so that you can use those things in the life of a missionary? And so what we want to do then is we want to train those people and give them an understanding about A, the biblical basis for why they matter, and B, that the people that we want them to specifically love on with their unique talents and with their unique gifts and so forth, that these people are experiencing something that is very unique. They're living in a cross-cultural context. And so part of what we've done over the years, and what's helpful for missionary care providers from a local church, is they benefit much from understanding the cross-cultural experience. What does it mean when somebody born and raised in a hyper-individualistic, right, hyper-independent culture, where independence and individualism are virtues, they're the things that are honorable. What happens when a person who finds their self-identity and feel good about themselves by what they do, what they're accomplishing, what happens when that person moves to another country and begins living among a group of people who have a completely different understanding of time, who have a completely different understanding of identity, where the people they now live among, their primary identity in their own eyes is as a member of their family, as a member of their extended family, as a member of their local community. And what happens to the American that has been raised with all of these things that make him feel okay about himself, and now you're in a context where none of those things are happening? What does that experience provoke them to think about? What are the stress points in those kind of things when somebody is in that context? And so part of the thing that is essential for doing where local church-based missionary care is that the team that's going to provide the pastoral shepherd level care, and this is both men and women, that they have an understanding of the cross-cultural experience. And what I've found, and I've done this training in dozens of churches around the country, when you do this training and people start to learn about what the cross-cultural missionary is going through, they learn a lot about themselves, and they also discover how much of their own culture has influenced their understanding of God's word and how to speak into people's lives and so forth. And so this is something that's really crucial. And then the basic idea is you have the practical care team operating with the nuts and bolts, taking care of details and stuff like that. And the people on the practical care team selected by the missionary, they're not required to have the same sort of life skills and inventory as the nurture team, but the nurture team has those, and then they are, they're equipped a little further with the understanding of what cross-cultural ministry, the challenges that it brings to the missionary, because there are unique challenges, there are unique stresses that cross-cultural ministry, it's just part of living in another country for the kingdom of God. And then part of that is that, again, these people have already a certain level of character, a certain level of maturity, a certain, inventory of giftedness. We also want to then help them sort of fine-tune their listening ability and the use of questions. So part of the thing that, that most missionaries that I know, that and the churches where I've trained people from their church, one of the most valuable things that those that are providing missionary care for them from their home church are the ability to use questions in a really powerful way, to where the care provider, the missionary nurture provider from the home church that's been trained, knows that a crucial component of keeping missionaries healthy is somebody genuinely interested in what they're doing and hearing about what they're doing, and then is somebody who will not only listen to them as they share, but knows how to ask them questions that provoke their thinking, and questions in particular that would lift their gaze from whatever it is they're facing on the field in their day-to-day life situation and circumstances. The home church people that are caring for them, the nurture providers, know how to ask the questions that lift their gaze from their day-to-day challenges up to the Lord, and then get them to look then at their situation through a lens that is influenced by God's sovereignty and so forth. And so part of the training of missionary care providers, nurture providers in a local church includes that. And it also, just the reality of it is the care providers in particular need to have, they need to be schooled on an understanding of a theology of suffering and a theology of risk, so that they understand this is what risk is. Missionaries are willingly put themselves by going and living in another country. There's no 911 number to call if there's a crisis, if there's some event or whatever. Part of being a good missionary nurturer is understanding that, hey, yeah, along with their loved family member from the church they're going to the field comes risk, and that suffering and lack of access to medical care, medical facilities and so forth, this could be very different over there. And how does that fit into our overall ability to care for those that are going to go to the field, for our ability to speak into their lives and to get them to sort of reframe what they're experiencing through the bigger picture of God's word and God's worth and value of, the reason they're out there. The reason they're out there is because our God is worthy to be known for who he is. He's worthy to be proclaimed for who he is, and they're out there in obedience to him. So I guess over the years, when I first started, and I'm just going to be real honest with you again, knowing the caliber of the group that's probably watching right now. When I first started attending some missionary care conferences back in the day, around 2000, 2001, around those areas, and I would talk to agency people or member care people, and I told them that part of what we do is we help churches send direct and even care for them. I sort of got some eyebrows raised, and even a couple of people said, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. It's like, hey, that takes professional. That's an area of specialty and expertise. And, churches are going to fumble the ball. Churches generally fumble the ball around. And it was just like a weird vibe. And so one of the things that I had to learn with my cross-cultural skills is, look, I have to, when I explain what our ministry does, I need to kind of reframe it a different way
And so I went from saying, yeah, we help local churches that send direct. That always got pushback from more traditional agencies and member care structures that agencies have. I kind of had to shift it around and say, look, more and more churches are sending people direct, and they want to be more hands-on with their people. And so our organization, we exist because they're going to do it anyway. They're going to send direct anyway. We exist to help them do it as possible. And the reality of it is, a lot of what missionaries need on the field from their home church to stay emotionally and spiritually healthy can come from their home church if that home church has a heart for it, is committed to it, and is willing to find the right people to provide that and then train them. And so I think that, if it's something that I want to encourage all of you, if you haven't done it yet, you can do it. There's, like I said, there's more and more resources being put together like every day and released on this. And for a while, I was part of a group that was just actually gathering to help churches with best practices for sending missionaries. And so there's a lot of people interested in that subject. So again, a lot of my experience has shaped and molded the convictions that I've come to on how to do this, how to send and how to send well, how to send people in a manner worthy of God, which is obviously the ultimate goal here. And the idea that, hey, when churches take this seriously and they send their own in a manner worthy of God, they really are becoming fellow workers for the truth. And I'd like to share just one final illustration with you, and then I'll shut down and you guys can ask questions or whatever. But living here in San Diego, coming from a military background myself, Army, not Navy, but here we have three aircraft carriers that are home ported in San Diego. And one of the illustrations that I'd like to use is the idea that an aircraft carrier, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, which is the new carriers that are out and about all over the world right now, a couple of them in the Middle East, they carry a crew of 5,500 people. So a nuclear aircraft carrier, the crew on that ship alone is 5,500 people. A little more than half of them are part of what's called the air wing, which has to do with the planes that they launch. And an aircraft carrier, a nuclear aircraft carrier, carries about 90 fixed wing aircraft. So think of that massive aircraft carrier ship. It has the capacity to carry 90 planes and launch those planes from its deck. It takes 5,500 people on that ship to launch those 90 planes. So it's about 50 or 60 people on the ship to every pilot that's going to fly one of those planes. And one of the crucial concepts about an aircraft carrier is that it has a mission. The mission is larger than any of the people on the ship. The mission is to protect the citizens of the United States and extend the power of the United States where it needs to be extended. And it's this idea that, hey, it takes all of these people doing their individual jobs to make sure the aircraft carrier can carry out its mission. The pilots, if the people that cook their breakfast and wash their clothes and the medical people on the ship, if you don't take care of the pilots, then you actually are, you're impeding the success of the purpose of the ship in the first place, which is to launch those aircraft. And so missionary care by the home church is similar to an aircraft carrier. God's going to call a family, an individual from the church to go. The rest of the people are to send, and there's all different facets of caring for the one who's sent. And that can actually be done. Again, if it's structured, if it's understood, if it's prepared for, and the people that provide their role are trained in what they do. So that's sort of in a nutshell the stuff that I think is helpful within the time frame that I'm allotted. So is that good for now, Carlos, Matt?
Yeah, Jeff. we've been swinging swords together 30 years. We were just talking about that a minute ago, and what a joy it has been over those 30 years. And I got to tell you, I never grow tired of hearing your wisdom about missionary care. And I trusted that you would start off with the theological framework in 3rd John. You're not just going to jump into the practicalities. And, I just want to surface that verse again that you hit on, because I think it says something that's so profound. We ought to care for such men, is what John says.
Yes.
The word ought, care is commanded. It's not optional. If you're going to be a church that sends in a manner worthy of God's name, it's something that's commanded. And so, again, I just really appreciate that, Jeff. Let me remind everyone, this is your opportunity to enter into the conversation with Jeff Jackson. And so just post your questions in the chat section.
Hey, Matt, let me share one other thought that is fairly new, fairly recent, is the idea from 1 Corinthians 16. Around verses 15 to 17, as Paul's concluding the letter there, he mentions Stephanas, Fortunatus, and Achaicus. And he basically says, look, he's saying to the Corinthians, you sent these 3 over here, and you were encouraged by sending them to me. They came and encouraged me. By encouraging me, they encouraged you. And so I consider them sort of the missionary care providers from a home church, from a local church. And then he makes this interesting statement where he says, acknowledge such men before the church.
Yeah.
And so in Paul's heart, he was saying to the church at Corinth, look, those that care for missionaries, those that go out of their way to love on missionaries in the name of Jesus, they not only encourage the missionary, they encourage the church that they're from, and they need to be noted in the church. Missionary care providers should be noted in the church because they serve such a crucial role.
That is so good, Jeff. I've lifted some of your material over the years, and I do give you attribution. I just want you to know that.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
But I'm going to take that one too. And the Bible elevates the importance of missionary care as high as it can possibly be elevated.
Yes.
In John, send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God's name, and then acknowledge these men. So I'm going to lift that one. That's a new one for me. Jeff, I'm going to jump in here because we've got a lot of questions coming in. Okay. This is from Nate. So do you recommend a care team and a nurture team for each missionary from a local church? If so, that sounds like 10 to 12 people for each one sent. Good question.
Yeah, good question. And I should have explained that at the time. No, each missionary provides, builds their own practical care team. The church has one nurture team for all of their missionaries. So if you have a lot of missionaries out, you might want to have a team of 10 to 15 people that are trained in how to provide nurture. But no, to answer your question, each missionary doesn't have its own nurture team. There's one nurture team for however many missionaries that church sends. But each missionary has their own practical care team.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I was doing the math too. I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah,
so and like you said, it's a special skill set. It's a certain wiring. It's a gifting from God. So smaller groups.
Yeah,
great.
And some of the churches that that I've trained over the years, they draw their practical their nurture team members from their home group, small group leaders, because they've been through training. There's certain characteristics, qualities they have, and so a lot of times they would call on those people, those small group leaders, to be part of the nurture team.
Yeah, that's good. So Holly says, considering that the church is the sender as opposed to an agency and has 2 teams caring for a missionary, the missionary there for maybe 20, 30, 40 years or more on field, is it a problem if people who are on the missionaries team move on? Are these teams sustainable with people moving on to another church?
Yeah, they are, but you have to be strategic to plan for them. In other words, if somebody's going to be out there, they're going to be out there a long time. A church is going to have turnover. It's going to have changes. So normally what happens when people have been on a care team and they've built meaningful and now their relationship with the missionary on the field has deepened because they've been in a care facility or a care facet. If they move on, those people are going to stay connected to the missionary. So that individual person or family is going to continue to provide care, even though they're not part of the missionary's home church anymore. What the home church has to do is have ongoing opportunities to, introduce their missionaries that are on the field to new members of the church or people that have joined recently, and provide the same opportunity to be a nurture provider that the people previously had when the missionary went to the field. So you work both fronts. And actually, in my own experience, some of the people that left that were incredibly loving for us when we went to the field and they moved on to other churches. They continued to love on us, and then they told that church that they're at now about us, which sort of broadened our base of people caring about us also.
Yeah, that's good. I would think a great deal of intentionality would be needed to keep that nurture team moving forward. But if it matters, you're going to find new people when people, come off.
Yeah, and technology is just, I mean, there's no reason not to do that. I mean, if a church is intentional, you can bring, your field missionaries on Zoom into almost any meeting at any time. And even if you've never met the person, you can get to know them through technology, and they can be incredible potential nurture providers.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about those nurture providers, Jeff, as you were describing them, I mean, the one word that came into my mind was empathy.
Yes, absolutely.
These are people that have to have a gift of empathy. They need to see the struggling and the issues in a missionary and identify with them and listen. So anyway,
and Matt, you just, I'm glad you provoked me. Here's the thing, and this is just kind of a basic thing in general for Christians. You don't want the kind of people who say, "Oh, I'm very empathetic." In other words, people who self-identify as certain ways. If you want to know if somebody is empathetic and is a good listener, don't ask them. Ask a group of people in the church to describe them, and whatever the people they work alongside in the Sunday school or the parking lot team or whoever they work alongside, as they describe the person, that's how the person really is.
It's really good. Really good. I wrote down something else. Like I said, I'm lifting all your material, Jeff. But listening is loving. I mean, it is such a gift. And again, that goes right along with empathy, but this can't be the answer person. It has to be someone who listens.
Absolutely.
Here's a great question from Randy. It appears that the average term of a missionary is 6 or 7 years today. The previous question talked about those lifers, but they are shrinking. Research is showing that about 75% of workers are leaving due to challenges on the field, such as interpersonal concerns and a lack of adjustment. How could a local church be involved with on-field care along with the agency? So, church and agency coming together to provide that care.
Absolutely. And it's simply a matter of keeping, when a church is going to take missionary nurture and care seriously, and but their people are on the field through an agency, that agency has member care people. Every agency that I know, and all of them that I love and respect, they want the local church. Mm-hmm. They desire the local church to be loving and express their care to the missionaries. So it's a matter of the home church having the responsibility, or taking seriously the responsibility, to keep the agency informed. And even like whoever the contact is in the agency, like, Denny Spitter's role when he was with Pioneers and so forth, of like, hey, that key guy, letting that guy know regularly, hey, our nurture providers have communicated with the missionary this many times in the last 6 weeks, whatever. And so the agency knows, look, if it's a major agency thing that needs to be done from one of our professionals, we're going to know about it from the home church. And so the church taking it seriously to keep the agency informed, but knowing that they have the primary responsibility and they can do it.
Yes. Here's a great question, Jeff. How many missionaries from your experience can a nurture team take care of? Number one. Let's do 2 parts. Let's start there, and then I'm going to give a second part question.
Yeah, I mean, in obviously, the more horsepower you have, like in numbers, usually bigger churches have more people on the field. They have more horsepower in nurture providers. But that's not the main limitation. So we recommend, again, my recommendation is that the nurture team be, at least 6 people up to 12 people. And very few churches are going to max out the number of missionaries they care for based on the number of nurture providers. Because nurture providers, again, from this side of it over here, the people that are caring for the missionary, it's taken a few hours a month of their time to do it. And they're the kind of people that if there was another missionary going out and the things that they'd learned in their current missionary, they'd be willing to help with that, and then they could train other people. So I've never seen in my experience that there were too many missionaries for the number of people on the nurture team to really take care of. And the other factor is that certain people on the nurture team are going to connect with certain missionaries better than all of them. So you get 10 or 12 people that have been trained, they're nurture providers. It may only be 2 or 3 of them that really connect relationally, personality wise, and so forth. And so you got these other guys sort of waiting in the wings for the next missionary to go, or maybe even finding existing missionaries or people that guy in the field knows.
Okay, good. Second part to this question.
Yes.
Really
yes.
good one. What about confidentiality among the nurture team members?
Yeah, that's again, it's a tricky one, but again, the key thing is you're not professional counselors. Part of the training is, what you hear from the missionary is they're being honest with you. Part of the training is like, you have to use discretion. The realm that I've worked in, there hasn't been any need for written documentations about confidentiality. And again, it's the kind of thing where the people on the nurture team already have a track record among the leadership of the church and others of being discreet with information or knowledge that they know. Mm-hmm. And so we've never, in my experience, I've never encountered that, hey, I told somebody something on the nurture team and it got around to somebody else,
Jeff, do you think that it would be beneficial to have maybe just a framing document for a nurture team that maybe outlines some of those pieces, like,
yes,
if you're going to sit on the team, but also with an understanding that if the missionary, again, they're not licensed counselors, maybe some of them might be. I mean, that could happen. You could have a licensed counselor on the team, but most are not. But if something did surface that needed to be surfaced, that it would be appropriately. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, the churches that really do this stuff have those kind of things in place. And that's where, Dave and Lorene Wilson have a lot of background in that, and even with their experience with the church out here in Southern California before they made the move back east. So a lot of resources that would have those kind of documents also.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So this is not from the group. This is me.
Okay.
But can a church provide too much care?
Good question.
Are there, you mentioned that you have to have a theology of risk and suffering as a nurture team member.
Yeah.
Are there times where maybe this is really hard to navigate, Jeff, I'm sorry, but I got to thinking about as you were sharing, like maybe there's certain obstacles and barriers that they need to face. I mean, not that the care team can't be praying and supporting, but maybe they overstep. I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
No, brother, I think it's legit. I mean, it's very different than when I went to the field, and there's different method. There's different thinking on the idea of bonding with the locals, that you got to face the challenges. And so again, it's kind of that, like everything else, right? The technology, which makes it possible for us to really minister to them, can actually be a hindrance, where if they're calling us every day, they're not actually having to engage and go through the experience of self-denial and so forth there. I'm not aware of that happening. I mean, from a church care perspective, I have encountered it a number of times with family members where, the missionary's talking to their mom or their dad, like literally every day or twice a day. Mm-hmm. And as much of a blessing as it is to them, I've wondered at times, obviously you don't say this to people, like, hey, do you really need to talk to your mom or dad or brother or sister every day? And, maybe some of the stuff that you're going through over there, you need to kind of just navigate it in the spirit and in the moment. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and let me now say something as a result of that question. For every church that's caring too much, there's 10,000 that are indifferent.
Church caring too little.
So please be careful with that one. I just know,
right.
You watch your children struggle, and not to put the missionaries in that category, but there's lessons they have to learn through struggle. And for missionaries, there's lessons that I'm sure they have to learn through struggle.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Many people, this is interesting, are not necessarily at their home church when they
Right.
decide to go. For example, students getting a vision for going when they're in their college years, further people move around church to church. How can we best serve missionaries in such situations? So I guess this would be missionaries without a home church or ascending church.
Yeah. Yeah. That does happen. And again, I would just, yeah, I mean, it's tricky. It's hard to say something, concretely that applies to every situation. But, if somebody is at a college and they've been a part of the college group, the key thing is do they have a sphere of meaningful relationships with people, ideally not just their age and peer group, where if they're at college and they're part of the college group, are they attending a local church? I mean, those are questions that an agency would ask. Any agency or anybody that understands missions at all would be able to ask the question, hey, is the primary source of your care on the field coming from a specific ministry type, like a college group or whatever? And do you have meaningful relationships with a home church, the one you attended while you were at college? We have quite a few people at Shepherd Staff that, the church they grew up in, their home church, is still, there's great meaningful relationships with them, but they went away to college. They attended a church in the college town, and they have deep, meaningful relationships with that church. And now those two churches are caring for them as they actually get called to the field. So there's no cookie cutter pattern for it, but that is a challenge, because a lot of the people that are inspired to go and feeling called to go are that college age, but their whole experience has only been in a college group. It's never been in a local church with people of different ages and people that have kids and senior citizens. There's something about that you just can't duplicate, and that takes time.
Yeah. There's so many questions, Jeff. I'm not going to be able to get to them. So I'm just
No
going to do
problem.
one more, and then we'll bring Carlos back.
Okay.
But what counsel do you have for a missionary whose church is not caring for them well?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think one of the main things is obviously begin praying for them. That's kind of a no-brainer. The second thing is really think through and maybe get down on paper, what if they were caring for you well, what would that look like? Give sort of a description of what it would look like in its different realms. And then as you're praying about it and you're listing of what you'd like them to do, then just pray about, how do I communicate that to strategic or key people in my home church in a way that invites them in rather than critiques that they haven't been in. It's cross-cultural ministry, right? It's like that's what it is. How do you take the skills you've learned to live successfully in the field and then apply them in your relationship to your home church?
I love it, brother. Contextualization. It's what we just talked about. It's empathy.
Yes.
It's listening.
Yeah.
It's understanding where they're at and not being judged. It's seeking to build a bridge.
Yes. Yeah. And build on what's already there. However thin the tether of connection is, there's still a tether of connection. How do you use that to deepen rather than to potentially cut?
Well, brother, you blessed me. I know you've been a blessing to those online today, and I'm lifting some material from you. I'm going to incorporate it. I'll do my best to give you attribution. I love the 1 Corinthians 16, that these nurture providers, those who care for missionaries, were celebrated in front of the church. That's just beautiful. So, Jeff, if they want to learn more about Shepherd Staff, I know some of the resources you talked about today are on the website. How do they find you?
Yeah, well, for Shepherd Staff, it's ssmfi.org. I'm in the retired mode now. I'm still a man in motion. I'm open to anybody if they want to contact me or whatever. You can, give them my email address, but I would probably refer them, whatever. But yeah.
Well, David Jacket just posted the website so that you guys can look at that. And let me also say this: Jeff has done probably 8 or 10 webinars for 1615 on these topics. You did a whole series on sending direct, Jeff. I don't know if you remember that. But if you want to look at our archives, Jeff has put up a lot of content relative, and some of it's a little more granular, a little more detailed, but those are available for you to look at 1615.org.
Yeah, great.
Hey, Jeff,
Well,
what a blessing. Carlos.
Pastor Jeff, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure, brother.
I really do appreciate it. It's an honor. So thank you so much for that. I just wanted to make everyone aware that Missio Nexus, in partnership with Brotherhood Mutual, we've begun a study on risk and short-term missions. I'm going to go ahead and put the survey on the chat, the link, if you guys want to go ahead and do that. Truly appreciate it if you go there and check that out. So it's a church-specific survey. I'm putting it there, the link. Go ahead, click on that link, share it with other church mission leaders, and, be a part of shaping the future of short-term missions. So don't forget, our next church mission leaders peer-to-peer virtual event is April 7th, and we'll be talking about understanding Gen Z. I just want to say I'm Carlos Negrón with Matthew Ellison, and on behalf of Missio Nexus and 1615, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a blessed week. God bless, and take care.